At 3 in the morning, in a yard outside Asheville, North Carolina, I watched something on my own footage that I had to play 3 times before I believed it. It was not a predator. It was not a deer. It was not a raccoon at the feeder. It was the birds. The birds I had been feeding all summer, the cardinals, the chickadees, the wrens, the mourning doves were doing things at 3 in the morning that I had never seen in 3 years of backyard birding, and that I do not think most American backyard birders have ever knowingly witnessed. For 14 consecutive nights, I left an infrared trail camera trained on a single feeder from sunset to sunrise. What that camera recorded, in the dead hours between 2 and 4 in the morning, was a yard I did not recognize. Most people assume their backyard birds are completely inactive at night, that they sleep from dusk to dawn, that the yard at 3 in the morning is a closed system, and what is happening inside the trees and shrubs is the avian equivalent of unconsciousness. The truth is far more deliberate, far more alert, and far stranger than most people realize. There is a sound the camera picked up at 3:12 in the morning on the 4th night that I could not identify for 2 weeks. There is a behavior on the 7th night that researchers have only formally documented since 2019. And there is something on the 11th night, captured at 2:58 a.m., that made me realize the camera had not been recording what I thought it was recording at all. Welcome back to Birds Are Watching. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe, because what you're about to learn will change the way you look at every bird that visits your yard. Stay until the end. What the infrared camera caught at 3 a.m. on the 11th night is the part of this story Annually was not ready for, and I do not think you will be either. Tonight, we are going into the footage. 14 nights of infrared video, the 4 most extraordinary things the camera caught, and the moment in the 11th night when I understood I had been the subject of the recording, not the birds. Number 1. The cardinal that was awake at 1:15 a.m. the first night of recording was the night I thought the camera was malfunctioning. At 1:15 in the morning, the infrared sensor triggered. The footage showed a male northern cardinal sitting on the feeder, not asleep, not roosting, sitting, eyes open, body in normal upright posture, beak occasionally moving as if testing the air. I assumed an anomaly. An owl had startled it from its roost. A car door had slammed. Something had broken the night. Then it happened again on night 2. And night 3. Research from Cornell Lab of Ornithology on what ornithologists call nocturnal awakening events in American songbirds has documented that birds living near artificial light sources show increasingly disrupted sleep patterns, and that some species, particularly cardinals in suburban environments, will engage in brief periods of full alertness in the middle of the night. The cardinal was not awake because something had scared it. The cardinal was awake because the porch light across the alley had switched off at 1:14, and the change in ambient light had shifted its sleep cycle. The bird sat on the feeder for 40 seconds, looked at the kitchen window of my house, and returned to its roost in the holly bush. It had checked the yard the way a person gets up to check that a door is locked. Number 2. The mourning doves that came down in the dark. The 3rd night of footage caught something I had to consult with a regional ornithologist to confirm. At 2:40 in the morning, 2 mourning doves walked across the platform feeder. Not flew, walked. The camera caught them moving slowly, in low light, on a surface they would normally only visit during daylight. The U.S. Geological Survey's research on mourning dove behavior has documented this in suburban populations across the American Southeast and lower Midwest. Doves in yards with regular feeding and moderate ambient light will occasionally engage in nocturnal feeding, particularly in late summer when daytime competition at the feeder is highest. The doves were not lost. They were not confused. They were eating in the only window of the day when the feeder was uncontested. What the camera caught, more clearly than any guide could have explained, was a bird species I had thought of as strictly diurnal, making a quiet, deliberate calculation that the safest time to feed in a busy yard was the hour no other bird was awake to compete with them. The doves had been doing this for an unknown number of nights before I aimed a camera at the feeder. I had been refilling seed in the morning, thinking it had been finished by the previous day's regulars. Some of it had been eaten in the dark. Number 3. The sound on the 4th night. The 4th night was the recording I could not interpret for almost 2 weeks. At 3:12 in the morning, the camera's audio picked up a sound that did not belong to any species I recognized. It was soft, repeated, and conversational. Not an alarm call, not a song, not the territorial seat of a chickadee or the chink of a cardinal. It was something between a whisper and a hum. I sent the audio file to a researcher at the Cornell Lab's Macaulay Library, which maintains one of the largest archives of bird vocalizations in the world. The identification came back as a Carolina wren engaged in what acousticians call quiet song, or sotto voce vocalization, a hushed, low-volume version of a bird's normal song that some species perform at night, alone, in cover. Research published in Behavior and other behavioral ecology journals has documented quiet song in multiple American songbirds. The function is still partly debated. One hypothesis is rehearsal, the bird is practicing songs it will use the following day. Another is communication to quiet for predators to localize. What the camera had captured at 3:12 in the morning was a small wren, hidden in dense vegetation 30 feet from my back door, singing softly to itself in the dark. Not for me, not for any other bird in the yard, as far as anyone could tell, for itself. There was something about that recording that I sat with for a long time before I moved on to the rest of the footage. Number 4. The Seventh Night, and the behavior most people don't know exists. The Seventh Night caught the behavior that researchers have only formally documented since 2019. At 2:20 in the morning, the infrared camera picked up 2 black-capped chickadees emerging briefly from a cavity in a nearby maple. They did not fly to the feeder. They did not call. They preened. Each bird ran its beak through its feathers for about 90 seconds, stretched a wing into the cold air, and returned to the cavity. A 2019 study from the University of Maine on overnight thermoregulation in chickadees documented what they called nocturnal grooming intervals, brief midnight periods in which roosting chickadees emerge from cover, restore feather alignment, and re-enter their roost site. The function is thermal. A chickadee in regulated hypothermia is operating at the absolute edge of its survival energy budget. If its feathers compress during the night and lose their insulation value, the bird's body will not be able to rewarm itself by morning. The midnight preening is a survival check. What the camera had caught was 2 of the smallest songbirds in North America emerging into a 15-degree night at 2:20 in the morning to perform a tiny act of maintenance. That meant the difference between waking up the next day and not. You do not see this from a window. You see this only on infrared, only at the right hour, only if the camera happens to be pointing in the right direction at the moment the cavity opens. Almost no one in America has ever seen it with their own eyes. But what comes next is the part of the footage I was not prepared for, and it is what reorganized my understanding of what the camera had been recording the entire time. Number 5. The barred owl on the 9th night. On the 9th night, at 2:56 in the morning, a barred owl landed on a branch 15 feet from the feeder. The owl did not move for 19 minutes. It sat. It turned its head occasionally. It watched the feeder, the shrubs, the holly bush at the corner of the yard where I knew the cardinal roosted. It did not strike. It did not call. It did not fly closer. After 19 minutes, it lifted off and disappeared. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's published research on barred owl predation behavior in the eastern United States has documented the species' patient roost hunting pattern, a strategy in which the owl identifies an active songbird roost during daylight, returns at night, and waits without movement for the chance of a single accurate strike. What the camera caught was a successful negotiation that I would never have known had taken place. The cardinal in the holly bush did not flush. The chickadees in the maple cavity stayed put. The wrens in the woodpile remained completely still. Every bird in my yard, in the absolute dark, was tracking the owl with the half-awake monitoring their species evolved to perform. None of them moved. None of them gave the owl what it needed to strike. 19 minutes of silent vigilance, in a yard I was asleep through, ending in the owl giving up and the songbirds surviving the night. I had been refilling that feeder for 3 years, not knowing how often that calculus had played out 20 feet from my bedroom. Number 6. The 11th night. At 2:58 a.m., I want you to think about something for a moment. Across 14 nights of infrared footage, I had captured cardinals waking at 1 a.m., doves walking across the feeder in the dark, a wren singing quietly to itself at 3:12, chickadees emerging for thermal maintenance, and an owl in 19 minutes of motionless predatory patience. I thought I had been recording the birds. On the 11th night, at 2:58 in the morning, the camera caught a chickadee briefly emerging from the maple cavity, preening, and pausing before returning inside. The bird's head turned. The infrared caught the small dark eye clearly. It was not looking at the feeder. It was not looking at the holly bush. It was not scanning for predators. It was looking at the bedroom window of my house. I went back through the previous 10 nights of footage, and then I went back through them again. In a significant fraction of every nocturnal emergence, every cardinal awakening, every dove arrival, every chickadee preening interval, there is a moment, often less than 2 seconds, in which the bird looks directly at the dark window above my back door. Behind that window, I was asleep. The birds knew it. What the camera had been recording was not a series of unrelated behaviors. It was a continuous, distributed awareness of the human inside the house. The human who fills the feeder in the morning. The human whose lights go off at a certain time. The human whose presence is the predictable variable around which the rest of the night's behaviors are organized. The cardinal at 1:15 was not just checking the yard, it was checking that the kitchen window was still dark. The doves at 2:40 were not just feeding in low competition, they were feeding in the window when the house was confirmed asleep. The chickadee at 2:58, emerging from its cavity in 15-degree air, was looking at the bedroom window to verify that the pattern of my night was correct. I was not the photographer, I was the reference point. What the camera had been recording, for 14 consecutive nights, was a small population of wild animals using me, my sleep, my lights, my house, the rhythm of my hours as a fixed point in their own nighttime map of the world. The next time you go to sleep tonight, remember what you now know. Somewhere in the trees outside your bedroom window, small open eyes are checking on you. Not because you are unusual, because you are the most readable structure in their environment. I filmed my backyard birds at 3 a.m. I expected to capture what they were doing. What I captured was a record of what they were doing in relation to me. I was not ready for that. I am not sure I am ready for it now. Tell me in the comments, have you ever noticed something outside at night that you couldn't explain? Movement in the trees, a call you didn't recognize, a moment when you felt the dark outside your window was paying attention back? Tell me about it. What season was it? What was happening? I read everyone. I'll see you in the next one.